So this is how you would match a foundation. We're talking about standardization of foundation matching undertones, and also just helping your client to decide whether they like to look warmer or cooler, deciding on what skin tone they prefer. So first of all, you would have filled out this, which is a consultation sheet, so you would know already their skin type, any irritations that they get from certain products. Could be that they prefer a certain type of coverage as well. So these are all questions that you would have gone through already. Now, when you talk about your skin type, so this affects the different foundation that you would choose. So there are some that have more water-based bases to them, or there are ones that have more oily bases to them. So things like your mousse, they're a bit more oily, so they're a bit more for maturer skins. Or you have your liquids. These are much more of an all-rounder, so you would use these on combination skins, some drier skins depending on the oil to water ratio. So these ones are quite good for most skin types. Again, you would use them on oily skins as well because of the water factor in there. Once you have deciphered what their skin type is, you're then going to look at your tones. So with tone, it's important that you ask key questions. So when you are talking to your client, you're asking them, do they burn quite easily? This would mean that their skin's quite fair. Do they tan quite easily? Do they prefer to have an SPF coverage in there as well? So that affects the consistency of the foundation. It's also looking at whether they prefer to have a warmer complexion. So some do prefer this. Obviously, we would recommend as makeup artists that you don't go too warm, that you match your neck and your face. So this is what we're going for today. So I've got a range of different foundations here, so I've put them in darkness order, so that we're going from light to dark. I've also got a foundation mixer here as well, so these are really good to have in your kit. These enable you to adjust colours slightly, so you can get lots of different tones of these. So there's lots of tanned versions as well. This is a pure white. So I find that this is very useful to have just for any adjustments that you need to make. You can also add them to concealer, so it actually helps you with your concealer tones as well, which is another video that I'll be doing. So with foundation matching then, you need to make sure that you have some of these. Now these will allow you to not only mix, but it also helps your hygiene factor. So these foundations in particular don't have a pump, so it makes them unhygienic in a way where you would want to stick your cotton bud in there and then on the face, and then you could potentially stick it back in again. We avoid that. Obviously it's one cotton bud per dip, so that's what we would use the cotton buds for. Now I'm going to be testing here. The reason we test on the jaw is that we want the foundation to blend onto the neck. We do not want to have a mask effect, so it's important that we're able to match to the neck. A lot of people in shops match on the hands. Obviously in a shop you're not wanting to sit down necessarily or ruin the makeup you've already got on, but for definite matches we need to make sure that we're doing it on here, because your hands can often be a little bit more tan than your face, especially if you wear makeup all the time with SPF. So it's important that you don't do it on your hand. Okay, so we're going to try the 3 tones. Now makeup artistry are allowed to mix on the back of their hands. For beauty therapy you would need a palette for this. So I'm just going to get 3 different tones. Now the tones that you're choosing, always look for one that's slightly warmer than your client's natural skin tone, and one that's slightly darker than that, and then a lighter one as well. So this gives you a really good range, so you know whether you're going to get a match or not, because it might be that you need to mix the two. Okay, now if someone has a pink undertone, you would want to counteract that. So you would want to look for something that has more of a beige colour. If you have someone who blushes quite easily, for instance, so they have a quite high colour, again, this is something where you'd want to look for more of a beige tone. It depends where they blush as well. So if they blush more on the neck, so some people when they get nervous, for instance, they get a bit red around the neck and ears. So this is something that you need to consider when you're doing someone's makeup, especially a bride, because it might be that they're nervous on their wedding day. So you need to make sure that you're blending either down onto the neck and the ears as well, just to make sure that it's not a mask appearing throughout the day, so that you're covering all bases basically. So before you apply foundation, you would obviously prime, but at this point when we're foundation matching, we do not prime because we do not want to correct any colour yet. We're just literally testing before we do any colour correction. So that's before we put any green for any undertones in our skin that are quite grey, red, sorry. And then you've got peach for your under eyes. So if the under eye is quite grey and quite dark, again, varying with different skin tones, you can end up having something that's quite red if they have quite a deep dark skin tone. So it's always adjusted with who you're working on, and it's always going to be trial and error, but this is why you give yourself room to maneuver to be able to decipher which kind of tones you need to put on. So if someone has quite red undertone, you would not put a pinky foundation on there. A lot of the time you can tell that they're pinky, so you can see on there that it might have ivory or porcelain on there. So these are important. So I'm going to try this darker one, which I think will be too dark for me, but it's just so you can see. So I'm going to place this on my jaw in a line. I can see it's too dark already. Then I'm going to get a different cotton bud and get the one that I think will match me, and I'm going to put that down here. Then I've got the other one, the last one. So it's important that you keep track of which one's which as well. So I work in a 3. So you do your dark first, the one you think will match, and then the one that's too light on the other side. Okay, so you can see those there. The dark one you actually can't see that well because of the lighting. This is where you would decipher which one you think would match the neck the most. So you would grab your brush, and this is where you're going to blend out and test it out. Now I can see already that that is too light, too light for me. And then I'm going to blend out the other side, so I'm going to flip the brush and blend out that side as well. Yeah, definitely too dark. It's leaving a little line. And then we're going to blend out the middle. Now I've flipped my brush in between. Yeah, so that middle one you can see is almost disappeared. That's what we're aiming for. So what you do then, you remove what you have put on there with some cleanser, and you remove the colours that aren't quite right, just so you've got a clear slate again. Okay, then you get the one that you know is your match, so it's this one. You pop a little bit more on your hand, and then you can double check, obviously next to the blob that you did before, and literally go in with your brush and rematch the skin there. And blend it out further. This is where you would confirm with your client whether they're happy with the colour, whether they feel like they need to be a little bit warmer. But what you'd need to bear in mind as well is that you know, with photography lighting, foundation colours can often change, so you'd have to adapt. So with photography lighting, they tend to be quite warm. So generically, if it's just for a photography shoot, you would make sure that your foundation is that one shade lighter. If your for instance, outside and having a photography shoot outside, you would do it a true match, so you're matching to the daylight, which is what I'm trying to do now. But obviously we've got our overhead yellow lights in the classroom, so it does make it slightly more difficult, but this is why we use these lights here as well, just to make sure that we're getting the right tone. So these are white lights here, which mimic daylight, but they are of course not completely daylight, so you'd still need to check in the daylight that you have the right match, and I'd always encourage that, because there's no point doing a foundation match, going outside, and then the outside light tells you differently. Okay, so that is where you would start with your foundations. You would then either continue with a brush, or you can use beauty blenders to help blend out the foundation. And like I said, making sure that you're able to decipher whether it needs to go down onto the neck or not, and just whether it needs to go onto the ears as well. Always avoid putting foundation around your eyes. The eye area, the skin around it, is a lot thinner than the rest of the face, so this is where you should be using your concealers instead, because the foundation can clog the skin around the eyes, and make it quite congested. So very important fact there. That's foundation matching.